I'm Catherine Welch, and this is a Rhode Island Public Radio community forum focused on the future of offshore wind energy in Rhode Island. We're looking at the impacts offshore wind energy will have on the environment, energy cost, and the state's economy. We're talking now about the impact on energy costs, not only for residents on Block Island, but on residents and businesses in the rest of the state. Joining me for this discussion is Mr. Jeff Grabowski, Chief Administrative Officer and Senior Vice President for Strategy and External Affairs for Deepwater Wind, the developer of the first offshore wind farm off Block Island. Jeff, thank you for sticking around.
Thanks, Catherine.
And Matt Millhouse, Director of Renewable Energy Products for National Grid. Welcome, Matt.
Good to be here, Catherine.
So we covered some of the environmental impacts of offshore wind farms. There are also financial impacts. Residents on Block Island will see their energy costs drop, while residents and to a larger degree, major industry will see their energy costs grow. So let's start with Block Island. Jeff Grabowski, can you walk us through how the 5-turbine wind farm will power Block Island?
Well, remember, Catherine, that there are really two aspects to the project. One is a Block Island wind farm, which is a 5-turbine project. And National Grid, the operator of the mainland distribution system, will be buying all of the power from that wind farm. But in addition to the wind farm, we need to deliver our power to National Grid on the island because the island is not currently connected to the mainland. So we are also constructing the Block Island transmission system, which will, for the first time, connect Block Island to the mainland. That will enable the electric distribution company on the island to access mainland power rates. So we expect that the diesel generators that are now powering the island will be able to be powered down. And I can tell you that in August of 2011, folks on Block Island, because Deepwater Wind receives an electricity bill because we have some facilities on the island today, we're paying 57 cents a kilowatt hour in August. That was the Deepwater Wind bill for Block Island Power Company's electricity. So after the transmission system and wind farm are constructed, the island should be able to access mainland power rates, or rates that are a whole lot closer to mainland power rates.
And Matt, National Grid is not the power company for Block Island, but National Grid will still be playing a role. Do you have a sense of how much Block Islanders will see their energy costs go down?
Well, as Jeff indicated, Block Island, this cable is clearly bidirectional. Block Island will be able to access the same power supplies that the National Grid does through ISO New England. So they will be able to buy power at the prevailing ISO New England wholesale rates, which might typically run from, say, $35 a megawatt hour at off-peak times and not in the winter or the summer peak, and maybe up to as much as $80 a megawatt hour, which is like 8 cents, but that's a lot less than what Jeff just described, obviously.
All right. You're listening to a special forum called The Future of Offshore Wind Energy in Rhode Island. We're talking about the impacts on energy costs with Deepwater Wind Senior Vice President Jeff Grabowski and National Grid Director of Renewable Energy Products, Matt Millhouse. Matt, it's great that through this project, National Grid will help connect Block Island to the grid, but Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket have been connected to grids in Massachusetts for a while now. Why do we need wind farms to finally get Block Island on the grid?
I guess technically you don't need a wind farm, but the legislature, in crafting the Town of New Shoreham amendment to the Rhode Island long-term contracting standard for renewable energy, saw that there was clearly an opportunity to put the two components together. You connect Block Island to the mainland for access to lower-cost power supplies, but at the same time you enable what even at a demonstration level 30-megawatt wind farm output to actually get to the mainland, because obviously the load on Block Island is far less than the 30 megawatts the wind farm is capable of generating. It's more in the order of about maybe 4 megawatts peak in the summer.
So it takes the General Assembly to get Block Island on the grid, or can you as National Grid say, hey, Block Island, you want to be a client, or?
Not that simple. We would still have to demonstrate the need for the line, go through an approval process, have the Rhode Island PUC approve it. I think in this case, again, I'm not close to the legislation, but I think the idea in this case was to combine what the Rhode Island legislature saw as two good ideas, put them together, and get them executed at the same time.
These costs are being passed on, the cost of the wind farm project are being passed on to everyone connected to the power grid, whether they buy their power from National Grid or not. How much is this going to cost residents and small businesses?
In the hearing before the Rhode Island PUC, the company supplied some estimates. There are really two components to the cost. One component is the power supply cost that's in the contract with Deepwater Wind. We look to the extent that power cost, which includes capacity and energy and also the renewable energy credits, is above the projected market rates. And we capture that difference, all right? That's a cost. We also look at the cost of the cable. The cable will be constructed by Deepwater Wind, and it will be turned over, obviously, at a cost to National Grid, who will then operate it as part of the transmission system. Now, that cost also has to be collected from National Grid customers, although Block Island will pay part of it as well. Altogether, we estimated that in the year 2013, the first year of operation, those two components of cost would total about $1.35 additional per month for a typical residential customer who uses about 500 kW per month.
And then these smaller and mid-sized businesses, it's incremental, the more energy?
Obviously, the more power you use, different rate you would be on, perhaps, then the cost would be different. But that's typically a measure that is used to give people a good yardstick.
And then you have major industries in the state like Hasbro, Toray Plastics. Toray will spend more than $7 million over 20 years. Is that good for Rhode Island, for major industries to carry that burden without a say?
Well, I like to look at this as something that is important for all Rhode Islanders, whether they do business here, live here, or visit here or whatever. I mean, clearly, as I think all of us in this room recognize, there's a different path we're going to have to follow in our energy future, a path that differs quite a bit from what we're following today. We're going to need a mix of renewable energy, more flexible conventional supplies to help follow the load when those intermittent supplies like wind are not at their maximum output, conservation. There's a whole different future out there that we're all going to have to embrace. And in the long term, it'll be good, I believe, for both business and residents.
Jeff, this doesn't exactly endear Deepwater to big business in the state. What's stopping them from lobbying the legislature to bring down prices? I mean, how is this a sustainable pay model?
Well, I guess I challenge you on the premise of the question, Catherine, because the project was pretty widely supported by many businesses in the state, including the Chamber of Commerce was a very vocal and consistent supporter of the project, as well as a number of other businesses in the state. But you're right, I won't deny the fact that there are a number of businesses who were opposed to the cost increase that the project includes. There are multiple ways to look at this, and Matt has spoken to some of them. The project is not just an energy project. It's an environmental project, and it's an economic development project as well. And we all benefit to the extent we take those dirty diesel generators offline. We all benefit to the extent that we no longer have to tap into as much natural gas power here on the mainland because of the project. And we all benefit from the industry that we all hope we'll be able to create here. And as Matt said, this is all about choices. As a nation, we need to make choices about where our energy policy is headed. And we at Deepwater believe very firmly that the nation needs to make investments in renewable energy, and Rhode Island is at the forefront.
I'm glad you talked about making choices, because Rhode Island cities and towns, these are tough economic times. They're making choices right now about whether to lay off staff, get rid of services. And Channel 12's Tim White got his hands on figures showing that cities are also going to be paying more. Providence is looking at an extra $190,000 in its power bill. Poor Central Falls, where is it going to get $19,000? That is how their power bill is going to grow. So in this economy, is it fair when it comes, is there a better way than having these cities and towns who are struggling? We have one of the worst unemployment rates in the nation, and I understand we all have to make choices, but they're going to have to be making choices between higher energy bills so Block Island can get off of diesel energy and maybe staff and city services. I mean,
well, it would be wonderful, Catherine, if the United States had a feed-in tariff program to support renewable projects, as many countries in Europe do, but we don't, unfortunately. So states are left with the decision to either continue the current energy policies that we have or embrace the next generation of energy policies. There are no easy answers here, but we do believe that in the long term, cities and towns, companies large and small, and residents will all benefit from large renewable energy projects like the Block Island Wind Farm.
National Grid's Matt Millhouse, these are the price increases for the Block Island project of 5 turbines. How much more will prices go up with the federal project when 200 go up? Will that affect Rhode Island power costs as well?
Well, the future of that project is not yet clear. It is a project that Deepwater Wind has in active development. Before National Grid or any electric distribution company were to, in Rhode Island or elsewhere were to sign such a contract, it would have to go through an extensive review project, as indeed a process, as indeed the Block Island project did. It would have to be approved by the Rhode Island PUC, who would have to find that the cost and the benefits weighed out in such a way that it was appropriate to approve that project. The Rhode Island long-term contracting standard for renewable energy has a provision that the Rhode Island PUC has to find those costs commercially reasonable, as they did in the special instance of the Block Island project. Same standard applies in a broader way to all other projects.
And is National Grid at all involved in any way with the Cape Wind project that's trying to launch in Massachusetts?
Yes, we are. National Grid saw the Cape Wind project as being a project that essentially had all of its permits. It was a large project that could make a substantial difference in the ability of the New England region to meet its renewable energy goals. And we chose to actively negotiate under the Massachusetts Green Communities Act and signed up for half of that project.
And so will Massachusetts residents see their power bills go up the same way, and major industries in Massachusetts, the same way Torrey and Polytop will?
Yes, there will. The transmission component won't be there, but the power cost will, and we've analyzed the cost in the same way and defined those impacts. I don't remember what they are at the moment, but we've done the same thing, and the Massachusetts DPU did indeed approve that power purchase agreement.
Jeff, Deepwater's bigger project of 200 turbines will send power to Long Island and New York, Connecticut, maybe Massachusetts. So what's in it for Rhode Islanders to have these 200 turbines off of the Rhode Island, Massachusetts shore?
Jobs. Jobs in a better environment. The more power Deepwater can sell from our large project in federal waters, the better off Rhode Island from an economic development perspective is. The larger that project can be, the more folks we can employ. And just a word or two about the cost of that project. What we're seeing in this industry, because it is a nascent industry, is very similar to what we see in other kinds of energy industries and probably in lots of other kinds of industries. We're at the early stages of this industry, so we're talking about small projects with high prices. As this industry gets larger, as the projects get larger and technology improves, we're going to see power prices come down dramatically. And we are already seeing in the proposals that we're putting together for our utility scale project that the cost of power from those projects is rapidly becoming comparable and competitive with new fossil fuel generation in the Northeast. So there's a good end to this story, but we can't get to that end unless we start somewhere.
Journey of 1,000 miles starts with that first step, huh? And Matt, are there any economic models? At what point is it the tipping point and wind energy becomes competitive with fossil fuel energy?
When fossil fuel costs continue to increase, and as Jeff said, when the cost of offshore wind continue to come down through applications of more advanced technology, larger scale, maybe better transmission. Eventually, there's going to be a point of maybe total intersection or at least near intersection. And when you look at the total overall mix of energy resources, there's going to be a definite role for wind power, both onshore and offshore.
All right. Right. You're listening to a special forum called The Future of Offshore Wind Energy in Rhode Island. We've been talking about the impact of offshore wind energy will have on energy costs with Deepwater Wind Senior Vice President Jeff Grabowski and National Grid Director of Renewable Energy Products, Matt Milhouse. Thank you. And joining us for the next segment is former Rhode Island Governor Don Carcieri as we talk about the economic impact of offshore wind energy. The forum is produced by Rhode Island Public Radio in collaboration with the Rhode Island Foundation and is underwritten by the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation.